They make
Now,
$16.5 billion.
I've talked about the direct cost and the, let us say, the absence of facts in the arguments made by the government in the minister's presentation. But I also want to talk about the impact of effectively restoring the previous situation where the Ontario Energy Board is just a glove puppet for the Minister of Energy. Not a good thing. Not a good thing. It's bad news to change the law so that all future energy decisions or regulations through the Ontario Energy Board will be made in the same way the Premier made his decision about the Green Belt or about Staples or about privatizing healthcare out of public sight by politicians on a massage table or in Vegas or at a wedding party where they're celebrating and drinking wine with lobbyists. Do we want that to be the way decisions are made around energy? Let's look at how the decision was made by the Ontario Energy Board on protecting people from higher Enbridge rates. And again, I'm going to go back to the excellent article by the energy lawyer Ian Mondro from his article. At 6 p.m. on December 21st, the OEB publicly issued a comprehensive decision on an application by Enbridge for approval of Ontario gas distribution rates commencing January 1st, 2024. The decision is the result of a thorough public hearing process which involved more than a year of review, thousands of pages of company and expert evidence, a comprehensive oral hearing, and a thorough process for submissions by Enbridge, OEB staff, and a number of informed, indeed expert, customer and public interest intervenor representatives. The comprehensive, well-written and fully reasoned decision is 147 pages long. So, what did we have? We had a public process that people could attend or follow. I followed it for the last year. Thousands of pages of evidence that were introduced. I have to say I didn't read thousands of pages. I read quite a few hundred, but not thousands. Interesting stuff. The consultant for Enbridge, two consultants. One consultant, their economic consultant, talked about the threat of a death spiral for this particular utility because as the cost of heating went up by gas, more and more people would leave the system. And as more and more people left the system, those who were left behind would pay a higher fee, and more people would leave. So, real risk to the system. How do you manage that? Part of the way you manage it is you actually focus on repair rather than expansion, so you control your costs. That's something the OEB was very interested in. But again, you had a public process, you had people who were trained in adjudication and familiarity with the energy system, listening to presentations by those who had expertise with energy, who were hired as consultants to give information. These were not lobbyists who were wining and dining the board. They weren't taking the board out for lunch, getting them drunked up, and then sending them back into the room. No, they were trying to present evidence so that, in fact, you could have a rational assessment of the options before us. What does the Premier want in the place of a public hearing with evidence that could be challenged by numerous interveners and by adjudicators themselves? Well, first of all, this bill gives the government power to overturn the key decision within that OEB order. That's under discussion. This gives the government the power to increase your gas bill, to take money out of your pocket and put it into the pockets of Enbridge investors so they get richer. Yep. That's what this is about. So the government wants to have the power to make Enbridge richer and you poorer. It allows the minister, with the approval of the Lieutenant Governor and Council, that's the Cabinet, to direct the Ontario Energy Board that the construction of a new natural gas transmission line is in the public interest. Normally, the Ontario Energy Board would hold a hearing to determine whether a proposed project is in the public interest. Yeah. Does it actually do what it should do? Will it put a financial burden on the other customers? Is there a justification for this that allows an investment of the money that's taken out of your pocket, you, the ratepayers? This provision in the Act would oblige the Ontario Energy Board to grant leave to construct without a hearing. In other words, we go to energy decision-making by lobbyists and members of the government's cabinet, or maybe just by the Premier's staff. I'm not sure which. Only the RCMP knows for sure who makes these decisions. But it means that the ability to actually have decisions or proposals reviewed in public with evidence presented, considered, challenged, and adjudicated, that doesn't have to happen anymore. It's just lobbyists bringing home the bacon for their clients, and that bacon is you and me, paying more out of our pockets to make Enbridge richer. It allows the minister, with the approval of the cabinet, to overturn any OEB order that either refused to approve a gas transmission line or required the beneficiaries of the expansion to pay upfront capital costs. In other words, if the OEB determines that a gas pipeline project is not in the public interest, then the cabinet can force the OEB to let it proceed anyway. You know, at this point, you have to ask, why do you have a regulator? Because frankly, they're just, scenery. They're a mountain picture painted on a wall. They are of no consequence because the real decisions will be made by lobbyists and cabinet members, and the chiefs of staff report to the Premier and those ministers. There are other ways that Bill 165 would allow the Premier to force gas customers to pay costs that the OEB would otherwise not allow. Currently, no one can construct a new gas pipeline in Ontario unless the OEB determines this expenditure is in the public interest and grants leave to construct. This rule seeks to ensure that expenditures are properly scrutinized so gas consumers are not forced to pay for costly, uneconomical projects. So by deciding to allow politicians to make that ultimate call as to whether or not a gas line is in the public interest instead of an independent regulator, there's a risk, sometimes I really understate. This politicizes the energy regulation process. It just says, nope, thoughtful consideration, may I even say just business-like consideration is out the window. Who's got the pull? Who knows who? And who can actually get the decision that you need? Now, there is an example of a previous government that operated this way, the Liberal government, and we were here, and for those who weren't here when they were in power, we would tag team going after them.
We used to work with you.
Yeah, we used to go after them. We would go after them in committees, we'd go after them in the House, because we knew they'd politicize the process.
It was a field
and you guys are following that road. Sorry. This government, Speaker, is following that road of politicized energy decisions. The outcome is not good.
No.
The outcome is not good. So, not only does the current government want you to immediately be stuck with a bill for a massive subsidy to Enbridge Gas, and I'm talking $300 per customer over the next 4 years, it also wants you to be stuck with the cost of future projects that the OEB, the regulator, might dismiss because they hurt the interests of gas consumers. The process of hearing evidence in public by a board of people with experience and a mandate to protect the public interest is replaced by a process where the best lobbyist, as I said before, brings home the bacon, your bacon, to whatever company wants access to a subsidy from you. This is not well received in many quarters, and frankly is contrary to advice that the government has received. I'll go to the advice first, and then I'll go to comments from other quarters. In its recent report, Ontario's Energy Transition Panel, appointed by this government to look at the transition, and frankly, again to the minister's comment, transition away from gas home heating to electrification of home heating. The minister made that clear. In its recent report, the Energy Transition Panel made a recommendation that is inconsistent with Bill 165. They recommended the OEB should conduct reviews of cost allocation and recovery policies for natural gas and electricity connections, as well as natural gas infrastructure investment evaluations to protect customers and facilitate development of the clean energy economy. Well, this isn't protecting customers. I didn't hear once the minister say, when we change this, it will mean that the rate reduction that the OEB mandated will be maintained. No. The rate reduction the OEB maintained is out the window. Yeah. Customers will not be protected. You can go all around the mulberry bush. You can do the ring around the rosy. You can be the jack in the jackbox, whatever. It ain't protecting customers. It means higher bills. That's what this legislation delivers. Their own electrification panel recommended the OEB make the kind of decision that the OEB made, and that's the one that this government is working hard to reverse. Other people, other organizations in the energy field had comments like this. Adam Fremeth and Brandon Schaufele from the Ivy Energy Policy and Management Center wrote, and again, Ivy School is not your left-wing hotbed, right? It ain't. They wrote, overriding an independent economic regulator is a big deal. It is not something to be done lightly. The government's decision explicitly undermines the OEB and threatens the credibility of future energy investment in the province. Note that, future energy investment. Yes. When you have a government that operates in a way that is capricious, that is not open, that is not rules-based, but is influence-based, then it's not true with all investors. Maybe some think they can get that influence and get what they want. But a lot will say, you put money into that province, you don't know if you're going to get it back. You don't know if you're actually going to get a return on your investment. You could be sideswiped by someone else who's got more powerful lobbyists. I think their comment is a good one. Moreover, it's not obvious that this move is in Enbridge's long-term interests. Once a precedent to effectively overrule the regulator is established, there's little to stop future governments from using the tactic to different ends, perhaps against natural gas infrastructure. Interesting comment.
Yeah, like-minded.
Very interesting comment. Do you have rules-based, law-based regulation in Ontario, or do you set it up so it's influence and lobbyist-based? I think that's the choice before us. We know what the government's proposed. Mm-hmm. Not only do they want you to pay more on your gas bill, $320 over the next 4 years, they are also setting up a situation where you don't know what the rules are. The rules are whatever the lobbyists and the influencers can make happen. I'm going to quote Mr. Monroe again, energy regulation and policy expert at Gowling. Minister Smith would be well advised to consider the wisdom of the Energy Panel's recommendation and leave the matter of further consideration of new energy connection cost recovery policies with the Ontario Energy Board. I don't know, he seems to know regulation, he seems to know energy policy. Leaving this in the hands of the independent regulator would maintain transparency, consistency, public accountability, and a thoughtful and reasoned balancing of interests. That, after all, is the reason for an independent energy regulator. I think that's a pretty good summary. Why do you have a regulator? I mean, the logical last step in this bill really is dissolving the Ontario Energy Board because, frankly, you realize they're of no use to you. They're an impediment to you actually just dictating what energy policy will be based on what lobbyists and other influencers want to do. And those lobbyists, Enbridge, want to take money out of your pocket. They want to raise your gas bill. Their analysis, that Adam Fremeth and Brandon Schaufele from the Ivy Energy Policy and Management Center also noted the government's decision to override the OEB should have virtually no effect on affordable housing in the province. In other words, they fundamentally disagree with the Minister of Energy and his arguments that he made earlier today. Now, I'll quote an environmental organization. Environmental Defense wrote, this legislation would be bad for new homeowners. True enough. Bad for existing gas customers? Yeah, because they're going to pay more. And bad for the environment. The only one that benefits is Enbridge Gas. Richard Carlson, Energy Director at Pollution Probe, said the OEB was clear, correctly in my opinion, that the energy transition is underway and there's uncertainty about the future of natural gas use in the province. Also, as far as I know, the government has never intervened this directly in trying to alter an OEB regulatory decision, and that should be incredibly concerning to everyone. I think those are all fair comments. You have a government, excuse me, that in order to look after its friends at Enbridge is going to rewrite the law to make the regulator irrelevant. and make sure that you pay a higher bill. No wonder people are concerned. No wonder people are concerned. I want to take just a few minutes, because I don't have a lot of time left, to comment a bit on the other items that came up in the minister's speech earlier today. The minister said, he wants to protect consumer choice. Well, frankly, consumer choice hasn't changed. People can put in gas furnaces if they want. Developers can put in gas furnaces if they want. And there are two options. One is that the investors who receive billions of dollars from their investment in Enbridge can put in a little more money to pay for those hookups and pay themselves back over 20 or 40 years if they think that Enbridge Gas will still be in the home heating business in 40 years. They could do that. They could charge money to a new homeowner if the new homeowner actually wanted that. But I would say if the new homeowner actually looked at the economics of a heat pump versus a gas furnace, they would go with a heat pump because it's a better deal. No getting around it. So to say that he's protecting consumer choice, not the case. Consumer choice isn't being removed. What's being removed is the subsidy paid for by all the other gas customers. Just to be clear, $300 per customer over the next 4 years. Not a good deal for those who are customers. This OEB decision would increase costs. I've already gone through the evidence. Not the case. In terms of homeowners, the OEB determined it would be a wash, a very minor change, one way or the other, and frankly, other commentators have said it wouldn't be of great consequence. Predictable energy environment. Well, I have to say, and I noted this earlier about the fact that increasingly we will be integrated into the world market for natural gas. To the extent that we stay with gas, our prices, our costs become more and more unpredictable. We don't know what's going to happen. And frankly, to say that it would be predictable doesn't make sense. I think, frankly, you're far better off setting up a situation in Ontario where people depend on energy generated in Ontario, electricity, rather than depending on gas imported from the United States. Again, about 60% of our gas is from the States, and we are competing with others around the world who might want to buy that gas at a much higher price. So if you're talking about predictability, a predictable energy environment, you want to move away from fossil fuels and you want to move away from natural gas. Talked about a common sense approach. Well, I think a common sense approach is that existing gas customers don't get stiffed with a bill, $300 over the next 4 years, to make Enbridge richer. Frankly, common sense thing to do would be to look at the OEB decision, which was a very reasonable decision based on an awful lot of evidence, and say, yep, that makes sense. Best deal for new homeowners is to direct them towards an electric heat pump. The best deal for existing gas consumers is not to charge them more money, not to raise their bills. That would be the common sense approach. And let me see, there were some interest. Oh yeah, I just have to note the minister's satisfaction with his own home heat pump, that he didn't freeze in the dark, that it kept him warm through the winter.
We call that
that's
progress.
Great.
We call that progress.
I thought the point was really good. That he was endorsing it, that it worked, and it worked well. And I think that's what we need for people across Ontario, something that works well that they can afford.
A hopeful moment.
There were some things that were just so wild. He wants to keep heating costs down. Well, look at the evidence. The evidence is keeping heating costs down, you go to electric heat pumps. The technology is changing rapidly. One thing that people should be aware of, that in the United States, the Inflation Reduction Act that's in place right now is investing heavily in advancing the technology for heat pumps, so that heat pumps that already are quite functional at minus 30 will be even more efficient, more effective in the years to come. Places like Norway, people know about it, near the Arctic Circle, 60% of the households have heat pumps. That's how they heat themselves, 60%. Finland, pretty close, around 50%. Sweden, I don't have the number for, but my guess is in that range. They seem to be able to function, and they're up by the Arctic Circle. So if you want to be practical about cost, you want to be practical about a system that gives you a more predictable kind of heat or energy basis or security, go to heat pumps. He was talking about this decision would discourage developers from using cost-effective and efficient gas. Well, frankly, it would encourage them to use cost-effective and efficient heat pumps. They're going to put in an electricity line anyway, let's face it. So if you're putting in an electricity line, don't worry about the gas. Unless you've got a customer who really wants gas, well then, you can offer it to them. It isn't barred by anyone. If Enbridge believes what it says in its filings and its claims, it's certainly happy to invest in it. They can do that. They don't have to come to us, the other gas customers, to pay for it. And also the pragmatic approach of the government to energy. Interestingly, the Electricity Distributors Association and the Royal Bank of Canada, who are not noted particularly, again, as particularly radical organizations, both said that when it came to dealing with the immediate crunch in Ontario for meeting demand, that it was far more cost-effective and far faster to invest in conservation and efficiency. Both of them. And not just faster, more effective, but substantially cheaper. Substantially cheaper. And this government has totally ignored that advice. The independent electricity system operator has said numerous times that energy efficiency is cost-effective. It is a great deal. That minister is ignoring the electricity distributors who, frankly, know a fair amount about electricity in this province. Royal Bank of Canada, that has an interest in this matter. His own organization, the ISO, has talked about the value of conservation and efficiency in terms of low cost and the ability to deliver quickly the sorts of reduction in demand so that we don't have any power shortage. So I can't say that his approach is really that pragmatic. And just briefly about difficulties in both Alberta and Texas for failure of electricity systems in deep cold. The most recent problem in Alberta, 2 gas plants went offline in the middle of that crunch. 2 gas plants they couldn't be depended on. And in Storm Uri in Texas, when they had those blackouts, again, it was the gas system that couldn't handle the cold. The pumps for the gas systems were frozen. So in both cases, we're talking about problems with the gas infrastructure. That was the biggest issue. I'm going to wrap up, Speaker. Don't forget, this is really plain. The government wants you to pay more on your gas bill, wants to raise your gas bill, it wants to ensure that Enbridge has higher profits, it wants to take money out of your pocket to the tune of $300 over the next 4 years. Everything else is just smoke. All the other arguments are strange-looking scenery and don't bear on the guts of it. This government wants to raise your gas bill. That's it.
Thank you.